Well, welcome everyone. My name is Don Stouter, and this is part one of Chaplain Boot Camp, Basic Spiritual Care Training. I want to start off by thanking Desert Regional Medical Center and the Desert Care Network for giving me the opportunity to put this training together back when I worked for them. And I think as you'll see as we go through it, to some degree, it's centered around spiritual care volunteers or volunteer chaplains in a hospital setting. But I'm going to talk about the different settings where people are volunteering to be chaplains nowadays. And I want to be clear that this training really is for volunteers. For folks who want to pursue chaplaincy as a career, there's much more advanced work that you need to do, and uh, certainly, if you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. So, like I said, my name is Don Stouter. I am an affiliate community minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Desert in the Palm Springs area. I also work as the bereavement coordinator for Reliance Hospice here. I'm an author. I do quite a bit of teaching, and I have an almost 30-year career as a hospital and hospice chaplain. So that's where I'm coming from. Uh, I was also trained not long ago by Al Gore's climate leadership program. And so one of the things I'm doing with this work is to sort of combine my experience in spiritual care and as a chaplain with climate advocacy and movement chaplaincy, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, and which may be what has drawn you to this training today. I certainly hope so. So our goals with these videos, I think there's going to be 3 or 4 of them probably, is first of all, we want to build some basic confidence and competence in spiritual care visitation or providing spiritual care to people. And that, of course, includes grief support at times. We want to be able to do these things in person or by phone or Zoom. What with COVID-19 being the era that we live in now, as I record this, we're just entering our second year. Those other options have to be on the table. And of course, I'm going to try, as I said earlier, to tie all this into what's being called movement chaplaincy, or folks who are volunteering to be chaplains for things like demonstrations, Black Lives Matter demonstrations, or climate demonstrations, or LGBTQ marches or protests. Those are all under the umbrella of movement chaplaincy. We want to talk about techniques used in crisis intervention and end of life situations. We want to have some understanding of patient, family, and staff needs in acute care and home hospice environments, as well as in the field. And we want to be able to articulate a system of spiritual and emotional assessment, how to decide what it is we're going to do to intervene, and then how we're going to implement that plan. In the healthcare world, we call that making a treatment plan, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail in a moment. Again, I just want to show as an example this emerging movement chaplain group that is really working very hard to bring spiritual care and support and emotional support to activists that certainly throughout 2020 were very, very active in very important ways, and I'm sure will continue to be. So part of this training is to prepare people to be able to do that work as well. For more information on that and the steps that my organization, the Humanist Chaplaincy, has laid out in order to be certified as a climate chaplain, you should take a visit to climatechaplains.org if that isn't already where you found this video. And there's more information there about pursuing the possibility of being certified as a climate chaplain. As we begin this training, I want you to find yourself a quiet space. I want you to make sure that you have a journal or a notebook handy. Maybe it's a special one that you'll use just for this purpose, a special favorite pen, colored pens, however it is your creativity flows. I'd like you to have some texts or readings, either from your faith tradition or some things like poetry that have great meaning for you. And I'd like it if you had a practice And by practice, I mean some sort of a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice doesn't have to be religious, doesn't have to be something like prayer. It could be something as easy as taking a walk outdoors, or enjoying being with nature, or reading a reading every day that makes you think about something bigger than you. All of those things, and prayer and going to church and all that goes with organized religion are all practices. And I think it's really important, if you're doing this work, that you be grounded in something that is larger than you. And that may be religion and it may not be, but that to me is the essential definition of spirituality, is that you have a connection to something that's larger than you. And I also want to point out that it's highly likely that you're going to get triggered in some ways during this training. We're going to talk about very sensitive things. We're going to talk about things that you may have experienced in your life. And so I just want to give you that warning now. Shut the video off if you need a moment of quiet, if you need to take a second. I'll be here when you get back. One of the things you're going to hear me talk a lot about is self-care, and I want to make sure you start practicing that right from the get-go. So I suppose the big question is, why are you here? And maybe take a moment and write this in your journal, write it in your notebook, use it as a journaling prompt. Why are you here? And not just the superficial reason, I want to be a volunteer at my local hospital, or I want to volunteer for hospice, or I want to go join up with a local BLM group and help them out when they go on their marches and demonstrations. See if you can go a little deeper. See if you can ask yourself deeply, why do you want to do this work? Is it from a deep need to help? Is it from a place of woundedness? What's it from? It doesn't really matter why you want to do the work. Virtually all the reasons that you could think of are good reasons, but it really does help to quietly just get clear, quietly just get self-aware about why you want to do this work. And so I want to suggest that you take a second now, maybe put my little video on hold, and do a little charting about why are you here. The role of a spiritual care or bereavement volunteer or movement chaplain is multifaceted. First of all, you're the chaplain, you're the counselor, and that comes with baggage. That represents a variety of different things to different people, and we call that pastoral authority. And that doesn't mean authority for yourself so much as it means the authority that people tend to project on you. Having an awareness that people may see you different when you have a name badge that says chaplain on is very, very important, because it helps us be able to sort of dig through whatever baggage that person might be projecting in our direction, and see what the deeper need is, right? So understanding that your role comes with some authority is really, really important. The second thing I think that's important for spiritual care is that you're an expert listener without expectation or judgment. Now, if you said to me, Don, what is the one thing that's most important about providing spiritual care or even counseling, I would always say listening without expectation or judgment. And working on your listening skills without interrupting people, working on your listening skills without, again, thinking what you're going to say next. Just being an amazing listener is a really important clinical intervention. It is not a forum for evangelization. And if you are a person whose faith leads you to need to evangelize as part of your work as a chaplain, then I want to suggest to you that this work is not for you, and you should look to another avenue to explore in order to be that person, in order to be someone who wants to evangelize others to your religion. Spiritual care has no place for that, none whatsoever. That's a clear ethical breach. It's understood as a clear ethical breach across most world religions. Often, when we take care of folks, they're at very weak moments. A very weak moment is the wrong time, an unethical time, to force one's own religion on someone else. I can't stress that enough. We're going to talk about the fact that you're a member of a team, healthcare team, and or a movement team, and just like others, on the team, you assess needs and you develop a plan to address them. This is a medical model that you're going to hear me talk about at some length. As a spiritual care bereavement volunteer, you're an expert at cultivating self-awareness and self-care. See how I keep coming back to that. Knowing why you're doing what you're doing, having an awareness of where it is within yourself that this work is coming from, and making sure that you take really good care of yourself as you do it. And finally, you help others use their spirituality in the service of their healing. And that's a simple sentence. I think it expresses really eloquently what it is that chaplains do. And write that down, put a star next to it. It's an important idea. You help others use their spirituality in the service of their healing. Just to give you an idea, and again, this is a medical model of the different roles that people can play in providing spiritual care. When we think of basic spiritual care, well, everyone can provide that. Basic spiritual care is being compassionate, it's being welcoming, it's being reassuring, it's being a good listener. And then maybe we take that up a notch to people who've had a little bit more training or a little bit more experience in providing spiritual care. And now we can maybe learn how to screen for psychosocial and spiritual distress. Maybe we can use our professional knowledge if we're a nurse or a physician or in some other field and bring that to bear on helping people. And we can maybe deepen our compassionate and relational presence and listening. And then at the top of my little triangle here are chaplains themselves, people who have significant specialized spiritual care training in assessment and intervention and in making care plans, and also who have really, really good connections to community resources. Because one of the things you're going to find in your work is that you're going to want to refer people for different needs at different times. And so understanding what the psychosocial and spiritual community resources are out there available for you is important, so you can share that with people you're trying to help. One of the things that we're going to talk a bit about as we go along is this concept of action and reflection. And I'm going to encourage the use of things like a journal, for example, even after your training, so that you can constantly be going through a cycle of action and reflection, doing the work, right? Being out there, being a volunteer chaplain, and then reflecting on the work. Some people do that in small groups. They can be called supervision groups or just reflection groups, but some people use colleagues to do that with. Maybe you can use a journal to do it, but however you do it, you constantly want to be sort of thinking about, what do I expect to get out of volunteering? What do I have to share? What do I hope to learn? What are the things I know I don't like to do? And what are the ways I engage in self-care? And these questions I invite you to journal on now and to sort of constantly re-examine as you're going through your training and as you gain more experience as a volunteer chaplain. I also want to talk about confidentiality. So in the healthcare world, this is HIPAA, which is a federal law that protects confidentiality in medical records. As a minister, and certainly priests and rabbis and others might think of this as the seal of the confessional, sort of a Catholic term, but still it helps to get the point across. The idea that when we help people, the work that we're doing with them is confidential. We sometimes get special information shared with us. We have community and religious organizations that we belong to. We have to be cautious in public areas where others can hear us. We can have friends that are both patients or fellow movement workers as co-workers. Do they have a need to know the information that we're carrying? And we may be asked to keep secrets. And so right from the get-go, we want to develop a sense of confidentiality, that the things that people share with us will not be shared with others. Now, you do have a legal responsibility. You certainly have a moral responsibility to share certain kinds of information. One is that you have a responsibility to share information that you hear regarding child or adult abuse or neglect. The second thing you have an obligation to do is to share information if someone indicates that they're going to harm themselves. And then finally, you have an obligation to share information if someone indicates that they're going to harm someone else. All of those areas are important for you to sort of immediately drop the cone of silence, drop the idea of confidentiality when those things come out, and if need be, make that clear to people before you engage in conversation with them. The other thing, while we're talking about things like that, is let's talk about boundaries because it's real easy to get very personally involved in movements or situations that you're very, very emotionally invested in. But you constantly have to be making sure that you're not crossing over boundaries. And this gets back to what I was talking about before around things like self-awareness, right? You want to know why you're doing this work. We don't want to share personal information. We're not seeing behavior as symptomatic. We don't get to know people so well that we're using nicknames or endearments. We're very careful with touch. We do not engage in unprofessional demeanor. We don't accept gifts, favors, or tips. We're very careful about over involvement. We absolutely draw a line at sexual attraction and relationships. And again, getting back to what secrets we will and will not keep, we have to be clear about that with people. So what drives healthy boundaries? They have to be set and maintained in helping relationships to make sure that you don't do any harm to a client in the helping process. So let's skip back again to when I talked about pastoral authority. When you have a name badge or a jacket or a sign or a flag or a t-shirt or whatever that says you're a chaplain, a lot of people project power onto you, and that makes them vulnerable. You have to treat that vulnerability gently. And so as a helper, we don't want to harm clients in the helping process. We want to make sure their rights are respected and honored. We always want to be respectful and conscious of the need to guard their privacy, and we always want to be sure not to take advantage of and or recognize the extent of their vulnerability in any given situation. Some of the questions you can ask yourself if you're trying to figure out how close you are to going over a boundary is this in my client's best interest? Whose needs are being served? Again, self-awareness. Will this have an impact on the service I'm delivering? Should I make a note of my concerns or consult with a colleague? How would this be viewed by the client's family or significant other? And how would I feel telling a colleague about this? Another question to think about that's analogous to this is how would this look if it was published in the newspaper? Right? So some of those questions are ways you can sort of recenter yourself in the reality of what a boundary is or isn't. You also have to think a little bit about the structures that you work in as chaplains and whether people in those structures sort of grant you this authority or if they perhaps demean your value, and that could be hospitals, hospices, workplaces, different movements. Whatever the structure you work in is, you have to sort of find a way to mold and bend this call as a chaplain to be able to fit in those spaces because the spaces can be so very different. And you also have to make sure that you're not doing this with the expectation of praise from these structures that you work within. A lot of people don't understand what chaplains do. They don't understand what spiritual care is. And so consequently, they don't really know how to give you compliments or praise for it, say if they're your supervisor or teammates. And so be aware of the structures you work in and make sure you're doing this work for the right reasons. I want to talk a minute about spirituality versus religion because this will come up in my language and I'll try to remember to explain it as we go along. But spirituality and religion are not necessarily the same thing. They do have crossover areas, that's for sure. But spirituality is really a more inner relationship with something that's bigger than you, whereas religion is a relationship with the deity of that religion, as well as that religion's theology and beliefs and traditions, its organization, how it's led, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes those two areas, like I said, cross over, especially in worship or prayer or art or music or helping other people through volunteering. But when we talk about spirituality, we're really talking about something that is bigger than you. And in the case of providing spiritual care, again, we're talking about using one's spirituality, using that something that is bigger than you in the service of your healing. This is a good illustration as we move into talking about spiritual pain and spiritual well-being, um, um, what these things look like at different stages. You know, when someone's feeling in a state of total spiritual well-being, they're feeling connected. They're feeling like they have meaning. When someone's struggling, perhaps they're experiencing isolation or abandonment or anger or guilt or sadness or suffering, losing hope and trust or asking questions about life after death. I can especially see folks who are protesters or engaging in marches um, as having anger and rage at the people who are perhaps pushing back at them. And so that's a real spiritual struggle for people and a struggle to stay in a centered, peaceful place. And then all the way over to the left, this idea of total spiritual pain, emotional withdrawal, and meaninglessness. And we just think for a second about people that you've encountered um, um, in your life, whether they're family members or friends or acquaintances. You can sort of look back to them and to your own life and identify where they were on this continuum at different points when you had encounters with them. So what I'd like to do is stop here for part one and give you a little journaling prompt. And the journaling prompt is, I want you to write about a time when you were ill. I want you to imagine a time when you were ill. And write about why you were ill, how it felt when other people tried to help you, if the help was effective or not, what kind of help you would have wanted if it wasn't effective. Take a moment or a few moments and journal that, and and then you can go on to part two. But for now, I'm going to leave this here, the end of part one of our chaplaincy boot camp. I'll see you back here in a little bit.